What's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another New York Giants video. And in this video, we're going to talk about a couple of things. The coaching staff is beginning to fill out. Joe Shane and Brian Dable have been doing a nice job so far, filling some voids in. There still are a few coaching vacancies on the roster. The Giants, the biggest one, need a defensive coordinator / assistant head coach. And hopefully we find out early this week who that person will be. The Giants have interviewed several candidates thus far. Hank earlier this weekend talked about Wink Martindale, Jim Schwartz, Sean Asai, and now we add Steve Wilks to that list. The Giants interviewed Steve Wilks for their vacant defensive coordinator position. Now, before I dive any further into this, I want to remind you all to check us out on all of our social media platforms. You can see running across our ticker below on Instagram, YouTube, and Twitter. And if you like what you hear in these videos, make sure to subscribe to our YouTube channel at Big Blue Avenue for more exclusive content, whether it's from Hank, Sam, or myself throughout the course of the offseason. Now, I'm really excited to break down Steve Wilks because I think he's a very intriguing prospect. He comes with head coaching experience. He started coaching in the NFL as a defensive backs coach in 2006 with the Chicago Bears, and he was in that position for 3 years before moving on to the San Diego Chargers from 2009 to 2011. Then that's where he became a defensive backs coach for the Carolina Panthers under our former GM, Dave Gettleman, oddly enough. And then he was promoted to the assistant coach while still being the defensive backs coach for the next 2 seasons. And then in 2017, Wilks was elevated to the Panthers defensive coordinator and was their assistant head coach. After that season, he was hired by the Arizona Cardinals to be their head coach for 1 year in 2018. Remember, this was the year that they had Josh Rosen as their quarterback. This was the year before they drafted Kyler Murray. They were not good. They ended up going 3-13. Wilks was fired after just 1 season. Then he went to the Browns in 2019, served as their defensive coordinator. The Browns, again, not great, but they were starting to show signs of improvement. Baker Mayfield entering year 2 helped out that defense not having to be on the field as long. And currently, he is the defensive coordinator at Missouri. So he's on the college football level now, which, that is somewhat of a downgrade. But Steve Wilks, remember, back in 2018, he did interview for the Giants head coaching position that eventually went to Pat Shurmur, similar to how Wink Martindale interviewed for the Giants head coaching position in 2020 before it ultimately went to Joe Judge. So right now we have Wilks, we have Martindale, we have Schwartz, and we have Sean Desai, who was the defensive coordinator for the Bears this past season. Now, it's noted to mention that Terrell Austin was also interviewed, but was promoted to the Steelers defensive coordinator, so he's out as far as our defensive coordinator search goes. I think the Giants should expect to try to make a push for Vic Fangio. Maybe that's who I would want as our defensive coordinator. I think Vic Fangio, again, fired as the Broncos head coach after 3 seasons. Again, he never really had a quarterback there that he could rely on consistently and work with. Fangio did win 7 games in 2 out of his 3 seasons as head coach. And remember, he led that 2018 Bears defense to a really, really good season. They were 12-4, ended up winning the NFC North. And Vic Fangio was also the 49ers defensive coordinator, as Hank mentioned in previous videos. But this video is more to talk about Steve Wilks and his resume. Again, he's been a defensive coordinator for 2 different NFL teams, former head coach for the Cardinals for 1 season. Now, next part of this video, Giants also hire Andy Bischoff as their tight ends coach. Now, if you don't know much about Andy Bischoff, you're in luck because he spent the 2021 season with the Houston Texans as their tight ends coach under David Culley. Previously spent the 6 seasons with the Baltimore Ravens. And if you look at the tight ends the Baltimore Ravens have produced over the last 6 seasons, you look at Mark Andrews, you look at Hayden Hurst, you look at Nick Boyle, you look at guys like that and say, wow, they've produced pretty solid tight ends in Baltimore. And it was interesting because back in 2015, Bischoff was originally hired as an offensive assistant, then was promoted to the tight ends coach 3 years later in 2018, and was that ever since. So I think Bischoff, well, not ever since, but until he was hired by the Texans. So I think it's going to be interesting. Also, what's really interesting about this hire for the Giants, he brings some CFL experience. He was a coach for the Montreal Alouettes in the Canadian Football League, and there was a video, I believe it was posted by Talking Giants, talking about how Bischoff emphasizes the importance of blocking at the tight end position. And that is very important because the Giants have had tight ends over the past several years that couldn't block, couldn't help their offensive line. And I think that's part of the reason why Dave Gettleman went for Kyle Rudolph in free agency this past offseason, because Evan Ingram was not a proven blocker for the Giants. He was a receiver first and a receiver only. He really struggled with his blocking. Now, this year it got a little bit better due to the fact that Rudolph was in the locker room helping Evan Ingram groom him and develop. But there's a good chance that neither Evan Ingram nor Kyle Rudolph are on this roster heading into 2022. In fact, I expect neither of them to remain Giants in 2022, and that leaves us with Caden Smith, who is probably the best blocking tight end that we have on this roster. So I expect him to stay, and I expect the Giants to go out and draft a rookie tight end. This is a really, really good tight end class in the draft this year. So Andy Bischoff, I'm sure, will definitely have a say in some of these young prospects and who the Giants should potentially go out and get. Also, I didn't bring this up, but he was an assistant coach under Mark Trestman when he was head coach for the Bears. He was the tight ends coach there as well in 2013 and 2014. So interesting. Also, not to mention he's a North Dakota native. So I thought that was pretty cool when I was doing some research on him. Not many guys out of North Dakota outside of like Carson Wentz. But yeah, I hope you all enjoyed this video. We talked about Steve Wilks getting an interview. We talked about Andy Bischoff, and obviously the coaching staff is starting to form. Giants, they still need a running backs coach, a wide receivers coach, and the only two coaches they're retaining from Joe Judge's coaching staff are special teams coordinator Tom McGaughey and defensive backs coach Jerome Henderson. So it'll have to be seen who else is coming on this staff. We need a new linebackers coach, defensive line we need a lot right now. But the pieces are starting to fall into place. Puzzle pieces are connecting. And I'm excited to see what this week has in store for Giants football. Folks, if you like what you watch, make sure to subscribe below to the YouTube channel at Big Blue Avenue and tune in Thursday night, of course. Hank and I have been plugging this continuously. It is our final Facebook live stream of the season, but don't worry, we're not going anywhere. It'll just be our last Facebook live stream. Everything throughout the offseason will be pretty much YouTube exclusive, but we may do an occasional live stream here and there on YouTube or something, trying to continue to grow. But again, thank you all so much for supporting the channel. Really appreciate it. And without further ado, let's go Big Blue.